The music cut mid-note. The saxophonist's breath caught in the microphone, feedback whining over the silence. Someone laughed, too loud, then stopped. All eyes turned toward the stage. My sister stood beneath the chandelier, bathed in warm amber light. Her hand was outstretched, not to me, but to the man beside her. He stepped forward, fingers brushing hers, and the room seemed to lean in. He didn't even look at me, just lifted her hand, slipped the ring onto her finger, and smiled for the cameras. My ex. My ring. My name is Marissa. I'm 34 years old, and this is how I turned their betrayal into my blueprint for power. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The applause that followed wasn't real. You could hear it, how it faltered halfway through, a hesitant ripple more out of obligation than joy. Palms meeting reluctantly, some too quickly, others not at all. The chandelier flickered overhead, its light scattering across the crystal flutes and glass plates like nervous laughter. I watched one beam land directly on her hand. The rose gold shimmered like a secret no one wanted to say out loud. It fit her perfectly. Of course it did, because it used to fit me. I stood near the bar, a champagne flute balanced in my hand, lipstick smudged on the rim. The bubbles had gone flat. My fingers left small, foggy prints against the chilled glass, and condensation slid down my wrist. I hadn't taken a sip. Couldn't. My mouth was too dry, my throat too tight. My chest felt like it was shrinking inward, rib by rib. I didn't say anything, didn't cry, didn't move. I just watched the ring flash in the light, each glint like a pulse, a tiny fire reflecting every moment I thought I'd buried. "Surprise!" Lydia chirped too brightly. Her voice cracked on the second syllable. I wanted to tell everyone together, and he said yes last night. The crowd cheered, but it sounded wrong, like a laugh track out of sync with the show. That's not what he said when he gave me that ring. The microphone screeched as someone adjusted it. A cousin gasped. My aunt covered her mouth, whispering something to her husband. Someone dropped a fork. It clattered across the floor. In the mirror behind the bar, I caught my reflection. Shoulders stiff, eyes wide but hollow. Not angry, not shocked, just blank. Lydia turned toward him, toward Ethan, my ex-fiancé, the man who had once kissed the inside of my wrist and told me I was the calm in his chaos, the same man who vanished without warning 2 winters ago. He kissed her hand. She laughed that nervous, breathy laugh she'd always had when she was trying too hard to sound effortless. Cameras flashed. Half the room desperate to document the moment, the other half pretending not to stare. When Lydia finally looked back toward the crowd, her eyes swept across me for a fraction of a second, then slid past as if I were furniture. That's when I knew. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't fate or timing or some messy overlap of hearts. It was deliberate. They wanted me to see it. They wanted me to stand there and watch them claim the story that was once mine. I felt the hum in my ears turn into a steady pulse. My body moved before my mind did. I walked out slowly, heels tapping against the hardwood, the echo slicing through the chatter. No scene, no drama, just distance. Past the buffet table lined with untouched shrimp cocktails, past the Love and Bloom sign with its cursive gold lettering and a vase of pale pink roses that were already wilting at the edges. The bathroom smelled like lavender soap and melted wax. I leaned over the sink and gripped the marble counter until my knuckles whitened, cold, solid, real. The reflection staring back at me didn't look broken, just paused. My mascara was still perfect. My hair, still pinned from earlier that evening, framed my face like armor. The music from the ballroom seeped faintly through the door, a bass line with no melody now. No one followed me. That part cut deeper than I expected. Not my sister, not my mother, not even my father, the man who used to call me his lion, the man who said no one would ever dim my light. Maybe the chandelier was brighter than I realized. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe. The lavender scent was too sweet, clinging to the back of my throat. All I could see was that ring, my ring. Ethan had given it to me in Boston, outside a small Italian restaurant tucked between 2 brownstones. It had been snowing, flakes gathering in his hair as he got down on one knee. There was slush on the sidewalk, cars honking in the distance. I remember laughing, telling him he was ridiculous for proposing in a storm. He'd said, I couldn't wait 1 more day. 3 months later, he was gone. A text. That was it. I'm sorry, Mar. I just Can't. No explanation. No closure. The ring disappeared with him. I told myself he'd sold it, that it was just metal and memory now, and yet there it was, on her hand. The nausea crept in slow curling behind my ribs. I ran my thumb over the small diamond pendant on my necklace, a gift from my grandmother, something I still had, something no one could take yet. The door creaked open behind me. I stiffened, but it wasn't Lydia. It was Ashley, my childhood friend. Her heels clicked softly against the tile as she came in. Her reflection appeared beside mine in the mirror, eyes wide, mouth trembling like she wanted to apologize for breathing the same air. I had no idea, Mar, she whispered. I swear. I didn't answer, just stared straight ahead, watching the two of us in the mirror, me still as glass, her shifting from foot to foot like a guilty child. I thought it was a new ring, she continued. I wouldn't have come if I knew. The silence between us so stretched, heavy with the faint hum of the air vent overhead. She grabbed a tissue from the counter, twisting it in her hand. They could have told you privately. They should have. My voice, when it finally came, didn't sound like mine. Where's Mom? Ashley hesitated. Her reflection flickered as she turned slightly toward the door. She's standing next to them, she said quietly, smiling. Of course she was. My mother had always loved being part of a picture. Her daughters side by side, the illusion of closeness more important than the truth. I turned on the faucet, letting the cold water run. The rush of it filled the room, sharp and clean. I pressed my fingers beneath it until they stung. Ashley hovered. What are you going to do? Nothing. It came out steady, calm, almost too calm, and it was true, at least for now, because when you're standing in a room full of liars who think the story's already over, the smartest thing you can do is stay silent. Let them believe they've won. Let them hand you the knife. Let them dance under their own chandelier. I dried my hands, smoothed my dress, and walked back toward the noise. The moment I re-entered, the air shifted. Heads turned, conversations faltered mid-sentence. The live band had found its rhythm again, though the melody now sounded strangely hollow. The scent of champagne and candle wax mingled in the air. Lydia stood at the front, glass in hand, light catching the sequins of her dress. She raised her flute high, smiled too wide. Ethan stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. My mother was right there too, clapping, beaming, and I, her invisible daughter, walked back into place. I took a sip of my champagne at last. It was warm and flat, but it burned the way truth does when it settles in. Lydia lifted her glass higher. To love, she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound genuine. And second chances. A few people laughed. Others didn't know if they should. I smiled because I finally understood something. That ring fit her perfectly for a reason. Because it was mine. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of rage, not even heartbreak. I just lay there in the dark, the ceiling dissolving into a blur of soft shadow and faint streetlight. My body was still, but my mind kept rewinding, frame by frame, through every moment that led me here, every conversation, every laugh, every glance I hadn't questioned enough. The room was too quiet. The clock on my dresser ticked unevenly, one of those faint but insistent sounds that drilled its rhythm into the edges of your thoughts. I tried to close my eyes, but the second I did, I saw them again. My sister's hand, his hand, the ring. My sister's laugh when I first told her about Ethan came back first, that teasing, high-pitched laugh that used to fill our kitchen on Saturday mornings. The guy with the crooked tie? She'd asked, barely holding back a grin. Oh, Marissa, you're falling for another fixer-upper. And I had laughed too, because that was our thing. She teased, I defended. She was the dreamer, I was the realist. She used to tell me I made love sound like a business deal. Maybe she wanted to prove me wrong. Maybe that's why she didn't just steal the man. Maybe she wanted the story. I could still hear her voice from that night echoing in my head, the way she'd forced a giggle into her announcement, the way she'd turned a betrayal into a celebration. Turns out, she'd just skipped the screening and went straight for the replacement. The words tasted bitter in my mind. By morning, I'd stopped trying to sleep. The horizon was a pale smear of gray-blue light, the kind that makes the world look like it hasn't decided to exist yet. I got up, barefoot on cold wood, and walked to the dresser. My jewelry box sat there, small and neat, lined with faded velvet that used to feel luxurious. I didn't open it to look for something. I opened it to check, to see what was still mine. The little velvet pouch where I'd once kept the ring was still there, empty. The indentation still marked where it used to rest. Next to it, tucked behind a photo from Charleston, was the note Ethan had left me once, folded into a rectangle so worn it looked fragile. I didn't read it. I couldn't. I just stared at it like an artifact from a lost civilization. Something to be studied, not felt. When I finally left the bedroom, the apartment was too clean, too quiet. My reflection trailed me through the dark windows as I made coffee. The smell filled the space slowly, grounding me in something normal. I watched the thin stream pour into the mug, the swirl of cream disappearing like smoke. Sunday morning sunlight broke through the blinds, slicing the floor into golden bars. I traced one with my toe and thought of the chandelier from the night before, flickering above their engagement like a lie wearing diamonds. I didn't cry. That part of me had burned out long ago, sometime between the unanswered calls and the empty mailbox when Ethan left. But this wasn't heartbreak. This was humiliation, a different kind of ache, because everyone in that room had known, or guessed, or chosen politeness over decency. I walked over to the counter and picked up the pale pink invitation again. The cardstock felt heavy in my hands, too elegant for what it represented. You are joyfully invited to celebrate the engagement of Lydia Ann Monroe and Ethan James Keller. I read the line over and over, the words blurring slightly, as if they were printed in fog. No last names had been spoken at the party. Not until the invitation arrived, slipped under my apartment door last week. That's how I'd known for sure, that it wasn't a coincidence, that it wasn't a man who simply looked like him, that it was him, that it was my Ethan. I flipped the invitation over. The handwriting on the back was unmistakable. Can't wait to see you there. Bring your smile, Mom. There was a little heart over the I in Marissa, a detail she hadn't used in years. Maybe guilt made her careful. Maybe habit made her kind. I stared at that heart until my vision blurred. The coffee had gone cold. I sat down, the invitation between my fingers like proof of something I didn't want confirmed. I opened my phone, scrolled through old texts, search, Ethan. Nothing recent, just ghosts. Photos of us smiling at the camera like people who didn't know the future was about to collapse. A video from our engagement night, me laughing, cheeks red from the cold, him holding the ring box with both hands like it was fragile. Then the texts, the last ones. I just need some space. I don't feel ready. I'm sorry. A digital goodbye that didn't even deserve a period. Now he was engaged to my sister, wearing the same suit I'd bought him for his first big interview, the navy one that made his eyes look bluer. I opened the drawer of keepsakes, receipts, old letters, movie stubs, little anchors to a version of myself I no longer recognized. I told myself I kept them for closure, but that wasn't true. Some part of me had believed he might come back, that I'd wake up one day to a knock at the door and find him there holding that same ring. Turns out he did come back, just not for me. I pulled out a crumpled receipt from the jeweler. January 14th, 2021. Rose gold engagement ring. Size 6.5. Custom fit. That was my ring size. He'd guessed it perfectly. Or maybe he'd measured while I slept. He used to joke about knowing me down to the millimeter. I folded the receipt and tucked it into my coat pocket. I didn't know why. It just felt like something I might need later. Then I picked up my phone. Mom answered on the second ring. Her voice was light, distracted. Marissa, wasn't last night beautiful? Lydia's glowing. Yeah, I said. Glowing. She didn't hear the bite. Or she did and chose to ignore it. I told her to wear that sequin dress, Mom went on. It really shows off the ring. I let the silence stretch. Yeah, I said finally. About that ring. A pause. What about it? It looks familiar. Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear her swallow through the phone. Well, she said carefully, Ethan has good taste, clearly. Do you know where he got it? More silence. Then a small exhale. Why does it matter? She asked. Because I had a ring like that once. You had a lot of things once. That stopped me cold. Excuse me? I mean, she said quickly. You and Ethan didn't work out, honey. Life moves on. For all of us. I bit down on the inside of my cheek. Did you know? I asked quietly. Know what? That they were together before. They weren't, she said too fast. He called Lydia last spring. They reconnected. It was sweet. And you thought that was okay? I thought it was unexpected, she said, the way people say something is interesting when they mean it's awful. But Lydia, she's always been delicate. Delicate, Mom's favorite word. Her lifelong excuse for every bad decision Lydia ever made. I could almost hear her smiling softly through the phone. You've always been strong, Marissa. You can handle things. She can't. It wasn't comfort. It was justification. I hung up before I said what I really wanted to, before I let the scream in my throat turn into something sharp. That night, I went to the jeweler, the same shop on Main Street, still lit by warm bulbs and smelling faintly of cedar polish. The bell above the door jingled softly when I entered. The jeweler looked up from his workbench. Silver beard, thick glasses, the same man who'd congratulated Ethan and me 3 years ago. Miss Monroe, he said, standing straighter. Been a while. I smiled thinly. You helped my fiancé pick out a ring once. His eyes lit up. Ah, yes, rose gold, round cut, 6-prong setting, beautiful piece. Do you keep records of modifications? I asked. He blinked. For warranty purposes, yes. Could you check if that ring was resized recently? He hesitated, glancing at the empty shop. Then he nodded and tapped at his computer. After a moment, he turned the screen toward me. Resized to 6.5 last month. My voice was barely a whisper. It was always 6.5. He frowned. Originally, yes, but he brought it back for Polish. Said it was for a new proposal, wanted it to shine again. My stomach turned. Did he say who it was for? He smiled faintly. Didn't need to. She came in with him. Blonde, peach cardigan. Called him Ethy. The sound of her nickname burned in my ears. I thanked him quietly and left. Outside, the night air cut through my coat, sharp and metallic. The city lights shimmered against the pavement like wet glass. I stood on the curb for a long moment, breathing hard. The world around me kept moving, cars passing, strangers laughing, like my life hadn't just been rewritten. She'd stood in that same store, held that same ring, smiled at that same man who once promised me forever, and everyone had known, Mom, Lydia, Ethan. They'd built a new story over the ashes of mine, assumed I wouldn't notice. Or worse, assumed I wouldn't matter. They were wrong. Back in my car, I stared at the dashboard clock. 11:14 p.m. The street outside was quiet now. A thin drizzle began to tap against the windshield. Each drop felt deliberate, rhythmic, almost like a countdown. That's when I made my decision. Not revenge, not yet, but something more dangerous. I wasn't going to forget. Not the ring, not the toast, not the way her hand trembled when he slipped it on, because the timeline was starting to shift in my head now, and something deep in my gut told me this wasn't just betrayal, it was a pattern. And patterns always lead somewhere. The timeline. That was the part that wouldn't stop unraveling in my head, thread by thread, moment by moment, until sleep became pointless and daylight felt like a lie. Ethan left me in October. Lydia said he proposed last night, which was early March. That's 5 months. 5 months between heartbreak and handover, between silence and sequence, between the text that ended my engagement and the toast that ended my composure. But something didn't fit. It wasn't just the timing, it was the tone. Lydia wasn't a whirlwind type. She didn't fall fast. She tested the water, collected opinions, waited for permission. Ethan, on the other hand, wasn't a man who repeated gestures. He was meticulous, controlled, calculated. So why the same ring? Why not start fresh? Unless he hadn't meant to start over at all. I started small. Late at night, I scrolled through Lydia's Instagram, the glow of my phone flickering against my pillow like static. Her profile looked harmless. Filtered breakfast, skincare tips, the dog and seasonal sweaters, but betrayal hides best inside ordinary things. I scrolled back 3 months, 4. Then New Year's Eve stopped me cold. A blurry group shot, my sister in a champagne-colored dress laughing mid-toast. The caption, 2023, you surprised me. To her left, just a sliver of a man's shoulder, navy blue, familiar. The same suit from the engagement party, cropped out, but not quite. I zoomed in until the pixels bled together. The cufflink glinted faintly. Gold, rectangle, monogrammed, EJK, Ethan James Keller. I stared at the screen until my thumb started to tremble. So he'd been there. She'd been celebrating with him while the rest of us thought she was celebrating alone. I went back further, Thanksgiving, my cousin had posted a photo of the family table, the same pine dining table we grew up around, fake gourds and candles down the center, Mom's cranberry sauce and her prized floral bowl, and there at the far end, partially turned away, Ethan. That mole near his ear, that jawline I'd traced once with my thumb, there was no mistaking it. He'd been at Thanksgiving, and no one told me, not even when I'd called Mom that weekend from Chicago, apologizing for missing dinner. "It's all right, honey," she said. "Just a small gathering this year." Right, small, but apparently with a guest list. I felt something crack quietly inside me, not rage, not grief, just disbelief dissolving into clarity. I went deeper. Old emails, digital receipts, shared documents. I found one from a boutique jeweler in Nashville, dated early September. A cleaning and polish service for the ring. He'd taken it in before the breakup, before he left me. I stared at the screen until the date burned into my memory, September 8th. Then I grabbed my keys. The boutique was tucked into a corner plaza between a floral shop and a tailor. Inside, it smelled like vanilla and silver polish. A girl with sharp red nails sat behind the counter, clicking her keyboard in rhythm with the soft hum of jazz playing overhead. "Hi," I said, sliding the receipt across the glass. "I'm looking for information on this service order." She squinted at it. "Yes, we did a deep clean and polish. Beautiful piece. Is there an issue?" "Do you remember who brought it in?" She hesitated, eyes darting toward the small sign that read, "Customer Confidentiality Protected." "I'm not sure I can say." I smiled just enough to soften the edge, then pulled out my ID. "He used to be my fiancé. The ring was mine." Her posture shifted instantly. "Oh," she said softly. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize." "Was he alone?" Her voice dropped. "No, a woman came with him. Blonde, pink scarf. They looked close." The air thickened between us. "Do you remember when that was?" I asked. She scrolled through the record. "September 8th. A full month before he left me. A full month before I got the message saying, 'I just need space.'" I thanked her, left, and stood outside for a long moment as traffic blurred past. The cold cut through my coat. My breath clouded in front of me, visible proof that I still existed. She'd already been with him, while I was still engaged, while I was still rearranging my life to fit his. I didn't call Lydia, didn't call Ethan. My hands itched too, but something told me not yet. Instead, I drove to Dad's. He lived on the edge of town in a one-story house that smelled like coffee and motor oil. He still wore flannel shirts that had outlasted 3 presidents. When he opened the door and saw me, his eyebrows lifted. "Marissa? Hey, Dad, you busy?" He shook his head and motioned me inside. "Just watching reruns. You want coffee?" "Always." The kitchen hadn't changed. Same scratch table from our childhood, same calendar pinned with a magnet from Yellowstone. I sat down, tracing one of the old knife marks on the tabletop. One Lydia had made carving her initials at 13. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Course," he said, pouring 2 mugs. "How long have you known about Lydia and Ethan?" He froze mid-motion. The sound of the percolator filled the silence. "Since Christmas," he said finally. "That's 3 months." He nodded once. "Didn't like it. Still don't." "Why didn't you tell me?" He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. "Your mother said it wasn't our place. Said you'd moved on, that bringing it up would just reopen wounds." "The wound didn't close, Dad," I said, quietly. "They just danced on it." His face fell. "I told her it was wrong, but you know your mother. Once she decides something, it's gospel." "Did you know about the ring?" "The ring?" "The one he gave me. He gave it to her." His expression shifted. "You're sure?" "Positive. The jeweler confirmed it. The boutique confirmed it. Same size, same inscription." Dad leaned back in his chair, eyes wide. "Jesus!" "She accepted it, wore it, showed it off." He exhaled, long and slow. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I said, "but I'm not going to be quiet." He didn't try to stop me. He just reached across the table, his hand rough and warm against mine. "You take your time," he said, "but don't let them take your peace." The next day, I called Ethan, from a block number, just in case. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hello? It's me." A pause, then that voice, calm, polite, hollow. "Marissa, we need to talk." "Look, 1 hour," I said. Corner booth at Blake's Cafe. He didn't agree, didn't refuse, but he came. He always came when curiosity outweighed guilt. Blake's was half empty when I arrived. The smell of burnt espresso clung to the air. I chose the booth farthest from the door and waited, stirring sugar into a coffee I didn't plan to drink. When he walked in, something inside me stilled. Same coat, same posture, but different eyes, darker somehow, cautious. He slid into the booth. You look good. You look like a liar. He didn't flinch. You were with her before you left me, I said. It wasn't, don't lie. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. It started toward the end. We talked, that's all. You proposed to her with my ring? Silence. I leaned forward. Was that your idea or hers? He stared at the table. She found it in your mom's jewelry box. My breath caught. What? I gave it back to your mom after we broke up. Thought maybe she'd return it to you or keep it. I didn't want it. And she gave it to Lydia. She didn't say no when Lydia showed her, just said it looked better on her hand. Something cold rippled through me, my own mother passing along my engagement ring like a family heirloom no one asked for. Why didn't you buy a new one? I asked. He shrugged. She liked that one. That was it. No apology, no explanation, just convenience. You know what that ring meant to me? I said quietly. He finally looked up, guilt flickering in his eyes. I'm sorry. I stood. No, I said. You're not, but you will be. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car outside the cafe, the keys still in the ignition, but the engine off, the cold metal biting against my fingertips. Through the windshield, people passed by with paper cups and cardboard takeout in. Boxes, their coats flapping in the wind like they were caught in a race I'd fallen out of. The city hummed quietly around me, the rattle of buses, snippets of laughter, the faint echo of a street musician playing something cheerful for tips. It was a quiet Tuesday in Nashville, and no one knew that I had just been handed the final piece of a betrayal 2 years in the making. My mother had given my engagement ring, my ring, to my sister. That wasn't just complicity, that was orchestration. And the worst part? They all thought I wouldn't do anything, that I'd fold, fade out, and let them rewrite history without a single correction from me. They were wrong. 2 nights later, I drove to Mom's house. The sky was still pale from evening light when I parked outside. The blinds were open, and I could see her inside, moving between the dining room and the kitchen. She was setting up for Lydia's bridal brunch. Everything was pastel and planned. Tiny vases of baby's breath lined the table, place cards written in her perfect cursive, a cake shaped like a peony from the bakery she'd sworn was too expensive for birthdays but perfect for milestones. When I stepped inside, the smell of vanilla frosting hit me first. Sweet, suffocating. Mom looked up, smiling automatically. Oh, good, you're early. Can you help me tie these napkins? Her tone was light, rehearsed. I'm not here to help. The smile faltered. She straightened slowly, napkin still in her hand. Her eyes, the same shade as mine, narrowed slightly, the first crack in her mask. You're still upset, she said. I laughed softly, the sound dry. You gave away my ring. She blinked. You weren't using it. It wasn't yours to give. Her shoulders stiffened. She crossed her arms, that old familiar pose she had used whenever I disappointed her. You and Ethan were over. Lydia's wedding is a fresh start for this family. No, I said quietly. It's a recycled lie. Her face twitched, just once, but it was enough. You let her walk into a future you knew she stole from me, I said. And you smiled the whole way. Do you want her to be alone forever? Mom shot back. After everything she's been through? She's not delicate, I said. She's manipulative. Don't talk about your sister like that. Then stop asking me to pretend I wasn't the one betrayed. The air between us turned sharp. The silence after that felt heavy enough to break the light. I turned and left before she could answer. Outside, the cool night air hit my face, clearing the sugar and smoke from my lungs. I walked to my car, each step steady, my mind already turning. Back home, I pulled an old shoebox from the back of my closet, not a metaphor this time. A literal worn-down shoebox with a faded Converse logo and the faint smell of dust and cedar. Inside, old photos from college, ticket stubs from road trips, a dried rose from my first Valentine's with Ethan, a fortune cookie slip that once said, "You are loved deeply." But I wasn't looking for nostalgia. I was looking for proof. And I found it. A Polaroid from our engagement weekend in Asheville. Snow on the ground, me on a park bench laughing, Ethan kneeling, ring box open. The ring and that same ring gleaming like a small sun between us. I held the photo for a long time, my thumb brushing over the image until the edges warmed under my skin. Then I slid it into a new frame, something simple, silver, clean. I wrapped it in white paper, tied it with pale pink ribbon, and wrote on a tag, "To the bride, from family." I tucked it into my tote bag and stared at it for a moment. A part of me wanted to burn it, to throw it in the river, to pretend this wasn't my life. But the larger part, the one that had been silent too long, wanted the truth to have witnesses. The morning of the bridal brunch, I dressed carefully. Navy dress. The same shade Ethan had worn to the New Year's party, to the engagement, to me. Let her see what it looks like when something comes back full circle. Mom's house was alive with chatter when I arrived. The sound of laughter, the clink of glasses, the squeak of heels against the tile. The living room smelled like vanilla candles and fruit salad. Music played softly in the background on the kind of playlist meant to sound effortless. Lydia stood in the center of it all. Peach dress, perfect curls, that ring catching every sliver of light. She glowed, but it wasn't warmth. It was performance. When she saw me, she hesitated just long enough for everyone to notice, then smiled too wide. "You made it." "Wouldn't miss it," I said. Mom appeared instantly, cheeks pink, voice chipper. "Everyone, let's gather around. Marissa has a gift for the bride." Phones came out. People shifted to get a better angle. Lydia blinked. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." I handed her the box. The paper crinkled under her fingers as she began unwrapping it. Each rip of tape sounded louder than it should have. The ribbon slipped through her hands and landed softly on the table. She lifted the lid, saw the frame, and froze. Her smile faltered as her eyes focused on the image inside. Me, laughing in the snow, Ethan kneeling, ring box open. Her hand trembled. What is this?" "That's me," I said. "The first time Ethan proposed." The room went still. You could feel it, the collective intake of breath, the confusion, the dawning horror. Someone set down a mimosa too hard. The glass clinked against the counter, and the sound echoed like a gunshot. Lydia's face drained of color. She turned to Ethan, who had been standing near the window, watching the whole thing unfold. "Ethan," she said, her voice thin, "is this true?" He hesitated. That 1 second delay said everything. "Lydia, Mom's voice cut through, brittle and sharp. "Marissa, that was cruel." I turned to her. "So was stealing a ring from your daughter and giving it to the one who didn't earn it." I looked at Lydia. "You didn't just take a man," I said. "You took a future already lived, a love already broken, and you wore it like it was new." Lydia's chin quivered. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I thought he bought a new one." "He didn't," I said. "He gave you mine, and you accepted it without asking why it fit so perfectly." Ethan stepped forward, voice low. "Let's not do this here." "No," I said. "Let's do it exactly here, under the same light where you smiled and let everyone believe your lie." The silence rippled. People shifted, unsure where to look. I turned toward the rest of the room. If you ever wondered why I disappeared, why I stopped coming to holidays or birthdays, this is why. Because in this family, betrayal is forgiven as long as it's convenient, and silence is expected from the one who lost the most. Mom reached for me. "Marissa, please." "Save it," I said. I turned toward the door. Every eye followed. The air was thick with perfume and shame. My hand touched the doorknob, and I looked back once, not for closure, but for clarity. "I didn't ruin her," I said softly. "I just stopped protecting her from consequences." Then I walked out, leaving the sound of gasps and whispers behind me. The next morning, I woke up calm, not vindicated, not triumphant, just still. Like the dust had finally settled after a long, slow collapse, and all that remained was clarity, cold, clean, undeniable. No more wondering what I'd missed. No more late-night replays of every conversation, every look, every moment that should have tipped me off. No more twisting myself into smaller shapes to fit inside someone else's comfort. They had seen me grieving, and still they chose her. That was the part that used to sting the most, the knowing, the deliberate nature of it. But that morning, even that pain felt lighter. I didn't text Lydia. I didn't block her either. Let her sit with it. Let her try to wear that ring now, knowing that every glint of light carried the shadow of what it used to be, the ghost of my hand beneath hers. I made coffee and watched the steam curl up like smoke signals that no one was meant to answer. Outside, Nashville was just waking up, delivery trucks groaning past, birds fussing in the trees. Normal life, moving on, whether I did or not. I spent the rest of that week packing, not just Ethan's things, though there were still remnants, a sweater I'd convinced myself was mine, a book he'd underlined, a mug from a cafe in Boston where he'd said, "You make the ordinary look like magic." I kept the mug, not for sentiment, for irony, but most of what I boxed away wasn't about him, it was about me. About that version of myself I'd been, the woman who apologized for taking up space, who swallowed her questions, who mistook silence for grace. I used to think dignity meant endurance. It doesn't. Endurance without boundaries is just consent to be hurt again. So I started small, canceling plans I didn't want to attend, saying no without cushioning it with excuses, answering honestly when someone asked how I'd been. When people started whispering about the brunch, about the moment, I didn't rush to correct them. I let the story spread the way truth always does, naturally, quietly, precisely. No rage, no screaming, just a mirror held up. Because that's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't need to be avenged. It just needs to be seen. 3 weeks later, Lydia sent an email. No subject line, no greeting, just a single line. "I wish you hadn't done that." I stared at the screen for a long time, fingers resting on the keys. I could almost hear her voice, trembling, performative, halfway between guilt and self-pity. I typed 2 words. "You already did." Then I hit send. That was the last I heard from her. Mom tried, of course, a few voicemails. Always recorded in that soft, rehearsed tone she used when she wanted to sound like the bigger person. Families survive worse. Don't let bitterness define you. Be the example, Marissa. But it wasn't bitterness, it was boundaries. And I'd finally learned the difference. Dad sent a letter. Handwritten, folded into thirds, tucked inside a blank card with a photo of a Tennessee lake on the front. The kind of stationery you find at gas stations on road trips. His handwriting wobbled a little, like he'd taken too long to find the right words. "I should have stopped it. I'm sorry I didn't. Proud of you for standing up when I didn't. You deserve better. You always did." I read it 3 times. The ink had bled slightly on the edges. I framed that letter, placed it on the shelf next to the photo from my engagement, the one I'd used at the brunch. It didn't sting anymore. The ache had cooled into something solid, something almost peaceful. Because now, that photo wasn't a reminder of what I'd lost. It was proof of what I'd reclaimed. A few months later, I moved to Asheville. New job, new apartment. A small studio with uneven floorboards and tall windows that let in morning light. I could see the Blue Ridge from my balcony on clear days. The air there felt lighter, thinner, like it had been washed clean. The landlord, a woman in her 60s with paint-stained hands, smiled as she handed me the keys. "You're the first person to rent this place in almost a year," she said. "Must be good timing." Maybe it was. That first night, I didn't unpack everything. I opened one box at a time, slowly, deliberately. Every item I unwrapped had to earn its space. No ghosts, no placeholders. Just pieces of a life rebuilt from choice instead of damage. The city was quiet in the evenings. The kind of quiet that didn't feel like absence but invitation. I could hear wind moving through trees instead of people whispering behind walls. When I finally opened the last box, I found the silver frame, the one with the engagement photo. I sat on the floor, cross-legged, holding it in both hands. The faces in it looked young, naive, unaware of how quickly things could shift from forever to forgotten. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just looked at it for a long time, then turned it over, slid off the back, and pulled the photo free. The paper felt thin, almost weightless. I slipped a new one in its place. A photo of me, alone, standing on a bridge in the Blue Ridge Mountains. My coat buttoned tight, my hair catching the wind, my eyes forward. It had been taken by a stranger I'd met on a hiking trail, someone kind enough to hold my phone while I adjusted the angle. They'd snapped the picture mid-laugh before I'd even posed. And when I saw it later, I noticed something I hadn't seen in years. A woman who no longer needed permission to take up space. A woman who'd stopped confusing being quiet with being strong. A woman who had rewritten her ending not for revenge, but for release. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.